Type 3 authentication, something you are, or biometrics. This can be your fingerprint, your iris, your retina, your face geometry, your ear geometry, your hand geometry. It is also called realistic authentication. In this case, we also use it to authenticate someone's identity. If they are what they're supposed to be, they must be who they say they are, because all those features are unique to you. Type 3 authentication is clearly the most secure one, but it is also the most expensive one, and it does come with some unique challenges that the other two do not have. The reader over here on the right, that in itself can do multi-factor authentication. You type in your PIN, that's something you know, a knowledge factor, and then you use your fingerprint, biometrics. Since it's two different categories, it's multi-factor. And what we really do not want with biometrics is false accepts. We allow unauthorized people into our facility or our systems if we accept them by mistake. We can also prevent our authorized employees from entering the facilities or the system if we refuse them by mistake. That's a false reject. And those are the common errors on biometrics. The false reject rate can also be called a type 1 error. Our authorized employees are not allowed access. This can be if we set the settings too high. If we do 99% accuracy on a fingerprint reader, it probably won't allow anyone in, unless they're very, very lucky. And then type 2 errors, false accept rate. That's the people who shouldn't have access getting access to our facility, maybe because the accuracy is too low on the fingerprint reader. That's very bad. So what we want is we want a good mix where we don't reject too many authorized employees and we don't really allow anyone unauthorized into our facility. In the graphics over here on the right, you can see on the two axes we have the sensitivity of the reader and the number of errors. And where we really want to be is that CER, or the crossover error rate. If we have too little sensitivity, we have a lot of type 2 errors. If we have too much sensitivity, we have a lot of type 1 errors. So just like so much else in IT security, we find the right mix that matches our organization, that's not too inconvenient to employees, and doesn't grant access to people we don't want inside our facility or on our systems. When we look at type 3 authentication, we can at times either talk about physiological or behavioral characteristics. They should not change unless a dramatic event occurs, and that's your fingerprint, the veins in your palm, DNA, your palm print, your hand geometry, your iris, even your ear geometry. And yes, I do understand that sometimes when men get older, their ears grow. But the bones in the ear actually stay in the same constellation. I don't really know anywhere where they use ear geometry, but hey. And then behavioral characteristics. They can change over time, but they will most often revert back to the baseline. That's how you type, how you walk, your signature, your voice, how you unlock your phone. All those can be used to identify that you are who you say you are, but obviously they can also change over time. And then let's look at some of the issues we can have and maybe why we choose not to implement biometric authentication. Or at least be very careful how and what we implement. I obviously don't know the laws for the whole world, but I do know in Europe and in the US, you can learn some things from biometrics that would violate the employee's privacy. Some fingerprint patterns are related to chromosomal diseases. Iris patterns can show your genetic sex. Retina scans can show if you're pregnant or if you have diabetes. Hand vein patterns can show you have vascular diseases. And most of our behavioral biometrics could reveal neurological diseases, and there are many more. For us, as IT security professionals, what that really just means is we need to capture enough to have secure biometrics, but only that. We can't capture data for something else. And then obviously, we cannot reissue biometrics. If you're compromised forever. Whereas I can give you a new password or a new ID card, I cannot give you new fingerprints. And also many of our biometrics we show to everybody. We've probably all of us seen videos where people show the facial recognition that Apple phones uses and then have 3 or 4 completely different people unlock the same phone because the phone thinks they look the same. It is also relatively simple to take a 3D picture of someone's face and then print it out. The same with your fingerprints, your hands, your ears. And if you hold your hands up in a social media post with the victory sign and the peace sign like over here on the right, yes, people can actually see your fingerprints. They can copy them. Biometrics are awesome because they are so unique to you, but as I mentioned before, they also come with so many more pitfalls than the other two types of authentication. And even the behavioral ones can be copied. how you type your name, how you sign, how your voice pattern is. All that can be recorded and replayed. And if it's worth the effort, the attacker might do it. And this doesn't mean you need to be paranoid and start erasing pictures on your social media, but it does mean you need to be aware. You need to understand how social media works, how biometrics work. And the more you share, the more easy you are to compromise. And there are so many large data breaches on a weekly, if not daily basis, that we kind of become numb to it. Oh yeah, they lost 10,000 records. Oh, they lost 1 million records. Which to some extent is normal and not a big issue if you can just reissue them. 10,000 passwords, 1 million passwords, 10 million passwords. They could be reissued. You're no longer compromised. The same with credit cards. You're no longer compromised when the credit card is replaced. But what happens when we lose millions and millions of biometrics? The U.S. Office of Personnel Management got hacked and lost 5.6 million federal employees' fingerprints. Meaning, technically, those 5.6 million people are now compromised. So it should make us question when we have large data banks of biometric information. That needs to be so much more secure than we just do with the usernames and passwords and the credit card information. The FBI has a database of 52 million facial images, and Homeland Security and the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol is working on adding the iris scan and fingerprints of 170 million foreigners into the FBI database. If that's compromised, or any system like that has those huge amounts of biometric data are compromised, the consequences will be so much worse than the breaches we see today. And if the attacker then can combine that with, for instance, the data from the Equifax breach and the Republican consulting company that lost the voting records, now you have someone's name, social security number, credit card history, home address, voting affiliation, race, color, closest relative, fingerprint. You can do a lot of damage with that. So yeah, Type 3 authentication, biometrics, many more issues than Type 1 and Type 2.